Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website Roll20.net. This video I'll be reviewing Bryte, designed and built exclusively for Roll20. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Andrew, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick R, Andy, Chris, Manuel, Basil, Nick C, and Travis. And Gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Mark Gilstead, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean AK, Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Arash, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, and Fatboy619. Thank you all very much for your support. Bryte is the first entire RPG system built exclusively for Roll20, which is pretty cool. This video is going to be a little bit different because usually I review, D&D modules, and I don't have to sit here and explain how Dungeons & Dragons works to all of you, because hopefully you already know that information. And I'm obviously coming from a background of having played mostly D&D when it comes to RPGs. So Bryte is an entirely different system, so I'm going to be spending a good chunk of this review diving into what Bryte is, how it plays, how it works, as well as the included introductory adventure and what that looks like, and just kind of what everything you get in the bundle if you buy the Bryte starting bundle, and then my thoughts, of course, at the end in terms of how I feel about the adventure and how the system works in general. Overall, just at the top of the review, I kind of have mixed feelings, I think, ultimately. I certainly like the rule of cool sci-fi theme. I'm definitely excited about that. It does a lot of really interesting, completely new stuff, and then it also does things that bugged me, for sure. In terms of its implementation, again, there's some stuff that's very nice in terms of how it uses Roll20, and some stuff that I actually found surprisingly lacking, because I thought it would be, because it was designed and built exclusively for Roll20, I'd think it would be just amazing with all the, macros and interactive pages and all this stuff, and I actually found that was shockingly lacking for what should have been just an absolute home run in that regard. So overall, mixed thoughts, but we're going to get into it. First, let's break down what you actually get with the Bryte starter bundle, which is currently priced at $49.99. So the Bryte starter bundle includes the Bryte core rulebook, which that is available separately for $29.99, and that includes obviously the rulebook, which is put into your compendium that you can search through. The ship component pack, which is a bunch of modular art tiles for upgrading your ship, which I'll show you how it works. But it's actually, you have a ship that's basically a map on Roll20, and you can, as you upgrade your ship, you can drag literally like gun tiles and whatever else onto the ship, which is kind of spiffy. You also get the Bryte compendium add-on, which adds 3 new spaceship maps, all of them 5-foot grid, dynamic lighting, all that good stuff for Roll20 subscribers, and a safety cards macro deck, which is something that a lot of RPGs are starting to promote, which is the idea of anytime you want a player to basically hold up a warning to slow down on any kind of content that they may view, for whatever reason, objectionable or uncomfortable or anything else. This implementation allows you to do it anonymously, which I think is the key, because very few people want to, hold up everybody and draw attention to themselves that they're uncomfortable about a situation because they're uncomfortable. So this just adds a little deck here that you can. It's very oddly implemented though. As you literally click choose, you can drag one of these onto the board, and then you have to go over here and click recall. It's not a very sexy UI system for working through these cards. Roll20 is definitely designed for dice and not for cards. So, but it's a nice idea anyway. And then it also includes the Burning Daylight Starter Adventure, which that is available separately for $9.99. The adventure includes 3 5-foot battle maps, all of which have the dynamic lighting if you're a subscriber, 1 unscaled map of Alaxis, which is the galaxy that Bryte takes place in, 5 pre-generated characters, all of them have token art, 1 pre-generated spaceship with token art, and quick start rules, which you can see here on the right, which do a pretty good job of just letting you jump in and basically get the basics, very similar to the D&D starter rules for sure. Also, we get the token marker pack, which that is available separately for $7.99. By the way, I appreciate that a lot of these are available a la carte, so if you like some aspects and don't like others, you can kind of get them separately. The token marker pack just adds new But the little symbols when you click on a token, I'll go over some of this stuff, but hopefully some of you all know how to use Roll20 already. I will try and back up a few steps when I can and explain how this works. But with tokens, you can put additional symbols on the tokens themselves, usually to denote if somebody has like a status effect on them or something. And this marker pack just adds all like dozens of new of those that kind of go with Burn Bryte. Totally not necessary to play the game, but kind of a little added visualization. And finally, we get a whole bunch of map tile packs and a character art pack. We actually have 4 map tile art packs, which all of them include modular pieces to be able to build your own maps in different tile sets. And I will show you what that looks like, but those are very, very cool. The character art pack, of course, just adds a bunch of tokens and handouts. So all of that is what is included in the overall starter bundle, but as I mentioned, you can get a bunch of these kind of a la carte as you go. So, Burn Bryte. Where do I start? This is a dice-based RPG. And I guess, should I look at the character sheets? That might be the easiest thing to do. There are races. You've got, I think, 5 or 6 different races. There's like, there's cat people. There's these big kind of mech people that have like freaking, you can put all kinds of modulars. It's very, very Iron Giant, basically. You can even put people inside you. Like, they're literally like mechs that people like jumped inside and used. They got a cool backstory, the Peacecraft. There's a group of sentient bugs that are like that form a humanoid shape, which is, I think, ripped straight out of Gloomhaven. There was a shape-shifting race. There's a slug race that can inhabit corpses and move them around. It's all very, very cool exotic races. There are no classes in the game at all. It is entirely skill-based. So if we look at the Kithuk, which is a insect race, see, that's a bioinfo, yeah. So, and these are one of the pre-generated. So it comes with 5 pre-generated classes with all of these character sheets ready to go. And this is what the character sheet looks, by the way. This is obviously not D&D. This is nothing like D&D. It's all uniquely built for its own RPG system. Everything is a skill. Everything you do. That includes if you want to make an attack roll, or if you want to, persuade somebody, or you want to pick a lock. Whatever you want to do is a skill. There are no real like attack rolls, and there's no armor. It really, again, I'm coming from a D&D background almost exclusively, so a lot of this is like upending my entire worldview of what an RPG is. And I need to understand, and as well as a lot of you, I'm sure, that D&D really boils down to like a combat simulator. It's a miniatures war game that kind of masquerades as an RPG. That's where its roots are. Which is fine. A lot of people love that, and you can use D&D to be more of a role-playing simulator, but let's face it, a lot of those rules and tools are designed to promote combat or combat-related activities. Not all RPGs are like that at all, and this is an example of one that is not like that, although there's definitely still combat in there. You can see a lot of the physical abilities can be combat-related, but when you make a skill roll, let's use an example. Let's say I want to shoot somebody as this Kithuk pregen, and I want to use a ranged attack to do it. I would roll a skill, and then the GM would ask me, this is a cool pop-up that's integrated in the Roll20 system, or the GM would tell me what the complexity is to do that skill. So if I just want to shoot somebody and they think it's pretty easy, then it would be a complexity 2. If they think it's a medium task, it would be complexity 3. Maybe the person is using some light cover. If it's a hard task and they're using some good cover, or they're just whatever their stats are, it might be a 4 or higher. And my entire goal here, I'll click roll and you can see it, is to see whether or not I rolled doubles, whether or not I have any matching numbers. If I didn't, then it's a successful roll, which means if it's something on a D4, if you're rolling D4s, the odds of you rolling matching numbers are pretty high. Even on a complexity 2, and obviously as you go up, it gets a lot more common that you're going to end up rolling. As you can see here, I rolled a 3, 4, 1, 4, so that would be considered a failure. Now the odd thing is, and this is, I think, part of the misstep of this system, is it doesn't integrate into Roll20 that well, because it's showing a 0 and a 1. These numbers are not important at all. The number is telling you how many doubles you have. What it should be showing you instead is the big words success or failure, because that's all that matters here. You're just looking to see if you succeeded or failed. There is no there's no armor class, there's no numbers you compare to, there is no contested skill checks. Everything is either just you, the player makes the roll. In fact, on offense and defense, the player is making a roll. Enemies just always hit you unless you make a roll to defend against it, and it's just another skill check. And everything is just looking to see if you succeed or failed. Now, the better you are at a skill, the better the dice you get to use. So this character I'm looking at looks like they are much better at athletics and melee because they get to use a D10. And obviously, if you're using a higher level dice, the odds of you having those matching numbers are a lot less. In fact, I kept this open. There's a really nice breakdown of the percentages in terms of how skill you're using and what the complexity is determines your general success rate. And I don't think you would usually go above a 4. Typically, that would be an extremely rare, your character is a 1 in a million chance of succeeding. Usually use 2, 3, and 4, it seems like. And that's how skills work, and everything is based on those skills. So you would just click that, and then complexity, roll, and see if it succeeds or fails. If it fails, your GM just has to figure out what happened. If you're success, the thing that you said happens. If you failed, the thing that you said doesn't happen, or it could happen with some kind of mitigating circumstances. And it just, we get the only rollable table we get, which is another odd misstep here. You'd think there'd be macros like crazy, because that's something that Roll20 can do very well, is create all these helpful rollable tables and macros, and this adventure and the system doesn't actually use a lot of that. Instead, we get this one failure prompt, and they are incredibly vague. You caused a scene is one of them. I can scroll up, and a good thing turns bad. Something bad infects you. There's a new problem you must solve. So it punts a lot of the consequences to the GM, which I kind of have a problem with because it's so vague. And it's already vague in terms of it never makes you roll a specific skill for any single task that you want to make. So if you want to attack somebody in combat, it is up to you to decide what skill you want to use. You can use range to fire a gun. You could use perception to persuade the person to stand down. You could use deceive to somehow lie to them. And the result is you're still doing damage to them, but it's just, and damage is, as you can see here, people only have 3 or 4 health points. So everything you do just does 1 damage, whether or not it's actually you're using engineering or computers. Maybe you're hacking a nearby, camera and it shoots a laser blast or something. Anything goes, basically. It's very rules light. It's challenging to, at least I think, for the GM to try and make sense of all this. It relies on your players to be as big of storytellers as the GM is, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think this just requires the right group. It requires a group who is very into role-playing, very into ad-libbing and thinking on your feet and determining how to work through all these consequences and successes. And it's very intimidating for me, honestly, as somebody who comes from D&D and has, if you fail this, you take 2d6 damage, and here's a dex save, and all these things are very much even if you want to use something like bandage, it just says, let's see what the example is. I think it literally just says make a skill, so many of these things just make a skill check, but not a certain skill check. So for example, quick bandage, which heals you, obviously, it requires an action that requires a skill roll. It doesn't require a medicine skill roll, it just requires any skill roll, and it's up to the player to always justify the skill to the GM. Now, honestly, you can obviously, as a GM, shut anything down, and the example it uses in the book is, if you want to cross a chasm, you can use athletics to cross the chasm. You could use engineering to find out which structural piece is the right one that you need to vault off of. You could use maybe perception to try and notice a piece that's sticking out that you can maybe jump onto a little bit better. So you don't have to require athletics. Now, if you try to persuade the chasm to become shorter, then obviously that's something the GM can shut down immediately because that just doesn't make any sense. But you can see here we're having certain kinds of players that are always going to try to push those skills is going to be exhausting for you and for everybody at the table because everybody's just going to be constantly trying to use their skills. Now, the one cool thing it does do that I like the system is Nova Points. Nova Points are fuel a lot of your special abilities, really sexy, cool stuff you can do, and you can unlock as you level up. I'm using level up. You don't really level up, but that's the terminology I'm using. And the way you earn those is by using one of each of your kind of skill dice. So you can think of your D4s as being the skills you're worst at, and the D12s as being the skills you're best at. And as soon as you've used one of each kind, you earn 1 Nova point, which is a really cool idea, because what that means is it encourages players to actually use skills that they're not good at in certain situations, which could make it pretty funny. If you're a character that specifically doesn't do this kind of thing, then you could have them like, oh, I'm going to have my character, perform an instrument or talk to somebody, and they're not usually the face or something, just so they can get that D4 at some point in, and thus, get on their way to earning some Nova points. And you can actually bank Nova points due to the livability of your spaceship, which is kind of a cool way of making the spaceship have an actual use in, when you're not on the spaceship. It determines how many of these you can actually bank. So I really thought the Nova point thing was just a really cool idea and a neat system. The other system that I really liked, and I realize I'm doing kind of a haphazard overview, but obviously I'm not going this from somebody who's run Burn Bryte or has any experience with it. This is just for me reviewing things and trying to give you an idea of how this system works and whether or not it's going to, whether you think it's going to work for you and your group and whether you'll be interested in it. And I will be getting into the adventure stuff in a bit. The other system that I really like is that there is no experience and there's no leveling up, which again is a huge culture shock for somebody that comes from D&D. Instead, the game uses story paths, which I think is actually a really cool idea, and something that I've actually used in my D&D campaigns, especially the most recent one, Tomb of Annihilation, is the concept of a personal story arc for each character, not unlike a party-based video game where all of your party members have their own personal quests that you can tackle. Like BioWare does this very well for Dragon Age and Mass Effect games, for example. In this case, every single player character has a story path, and these story paths, there's like 20 of them. There are all kinds of different things. It's basically the reason the character is adventuring, and I like the idea, although it punts a lot of the information to the GM in terms of you're supposed to be hitting these milestones, of which there's 5 in every single story path. And you're supposed to be hitting these just every once in a while, and I think the idea is during this introductory adventure, all of the player characters should be getting their first event done. And when you get it done, when you complete one of your events, and a lot of these are just like you find, if you're hunting a target, it's just like you found information about your target. So again, it's entirely up to the GM about like how do you work that out, and how does it work out with your players, and it's way more. It's just rules light. I mean, it's totally up to the storytelling that you all use, and I think it could be very easily abused by somebody who's maybe more of a power gamer. Is like, oh, I'm going to go all the way to the end of my thing, because every time you complete one of these, you get to raise one of your skills from like a D4 to a D6 or a D6 to a D8, for example, and you just become better at that thing. Now, there are only, they're tied to certain skills that you can raise, or you gain new abilities. So the bad thing is, it is a very easily abusive system by somebody who's going to power game it and just be like, all right, well, I'm going to try to do is, I'm just going to tell you all the things that my character's been doing, in addition to the main story adventure we're doing. Hopefully you don't have that, and if you've got those kind of players, probably not going to like Burn Bryte too much, I'll be honest, because I don't think it would be very compatible. But I like the idea of the story paths. I think the concept is very cool. Let's see, is there an actual list of which story paths there are? I might have to go into the character creator to show them to you, but the examples it lists here that the pre-generated characters have is you want to create a masterpiece, you want to create like a big art project or a concert or something. Discovery is you want to be the first to find something. Mentor and student means you want to find somebody to teach or find somebody that can teach you. Temptation means you literally just want to give in to a vice, and it really follows like this character arc, like in a season of a TV show or something, where it's like you indulge yourself and then you hit rock bottom and then you crawl your way back up. Like that can be a story path. So they're all designed to be like character growth or production in some way, and there's just a ton of different options. And yeah, some of them are just like you want to battle people or you want to be competitive and just race. They're not all like necessary. And one of them's like falling in love with somebody. Like they really cover the needs of all kinds of different players and styles of playing, which is really impressive. And as you can see, the rewards are tied to increasing your skills. But the hard thing is there's just no real rules for any of this. It's just, it's up to you and the GM to just craft the story about how do you get to this next step of your of your character arc, and when does it happen and how often should it happen. There are some There's some advice about how often it should happen, but it's still a neat idea, but it's so light on rules, which is probably my overall opinion of Burn Bryte. It's just it's very intimidating from a GM standpoint. Those are the main things I wanted to cover. I'm not going to go in too far about how this system works because this review will be way too long. Although if you're interested in learning more about Burn Bryte, I could look at creating a maybe a specific video that would really dive into everything more specifically. But I'm just trying to provide a overall overview of the most important systems and the most interesting systems and the way it differs from others. In combat, there is no initiative. Everybody just takes a turn, which is, again, I really wish there was some method for deciding who goes when, because I think that can get a little too chaotic. It works almost like a board game where the enemies declare their actions first, then the player, and including targeting people. It's kind of like the game Into the Breach, where you get to see all that information. Then the players can react to that, including making defensive rolls, where it's just a case of if they succeed, they don't get hit. So they could all take the dodge action. There's a neat push your luck mechanic with combat, where you can just keep taking actions, but every action you take increases the complexity of that action by 1. And then if you fail, then you either get a failure consequence, or the GM gets something called a collapse point, which they can use to basically power up the enemies with special abilities or let them do extra attacks. And then at the end, after the players have gone, then the enemies all lock in and do their abilities and see if players got hit or not. I have no idea how that works in actual combat because I haven't played this game. That seems very, very interesting. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that there is no initiative for the players. There's no turn order. Everybody just kind of gets to choose when they want to go, with the caveat that once somebody goes, they have to complete their turn before the next person. And I do like the fact that you can gain advantage. You can, instead of attacking somebody or making a defensive roll, if you want to just I'm going to, make a knowledge roll based on the players, based on the enemies that we're seeing, or I'm going to hack into the computer to look up something and turn, maybe the lights off or something. And you can do what's called gaining advantages, which does not work like advantage in. Actually, it works similarly, I guess, how advantage works in 5e, where you get to add a pool of advantages, and players can use that to re-roll any of their failures. In other words, if they had any matching dice, they can use an advantage to re-roll. So I think those are all the big ones I wanted to cover, and it's a lot of just mixed results on what I like and what I didn't like. Character creation with the character monster looks really good. We can look at that for a second. Now, you do have all these pre-generated characters if you buy the starter bundle, or if you buy Burning Daylight, the actual adventure, and they're very solid. They've all got their story paths built in. They've got their skills there. Movement speed is just how many squares you can move. It's a 5-foot grid, but you don't just do it by squares. That's easy enough. They've already got special abilities and Nova abilities plugged in. So if you want to look at character creation, I think I need to make a new one though. Oh no, okay, it's got this one here. You just make a new character, bam, hit next. There's the different races, and the cool thing is they all appear in this little window. It's all, Roll20 is browser based, so it's all just a bunch of browser windows. Make a cat person. You can choose your culture, so instead of choosing your background, you choose your culture, which determines a lot of your extra skills. Your story. Okay, here we go. The story paths. Unfortunately, you can't see, because of the way that my streaming software captures this window, you can't see the pop-out that I'm looking at, but it is... gosh, there's a lot of them here, actually. And you can see that when I click them, they've got all kinds of different abilities. And then it tells you a breakdown how exactly to do them. And if you want to have some completed, so you want to make basically a higher level character, you can do that as well. Skills works very, very well. And the character monster looks really good. And this is all integrated very nicely. I think I actually partially already made this character, which is why you don't... These are all zeroed out, but... Essentially, you can see here, this tells you, hey, you've got one D6 you can plug in anywhere, and Mental's got too many D6s. So you plug that onto D4, and then you could plug this D6 into a different spot somewhere based on your background, so then it all zeroes out. Those are your starting skills. You've got some abilities you can add. Every race has an ability, and you can add some equipment, review, and then make the character. So it all looks really well from that standpoint. I like the character monster quite a bit. Let's look at... I guess we could look at the rule book, although it's not that sexy to show it, but this is what the rule book looks like. It's not the easiest thing to look through, honestly. you can see here's what it looks like in the compendium, and you can just kind of click each of these and then click on an individual thing. I mean, this is the design for, you know, a search bar, basically. You just look whatever information you need and just search for that. In order to even find this, I had to kind of like dig through like the miscellaneous tab and then click on different things to actually get this to what looks like the actual rulebook kind of in order. But because it's designed for, you know, Roll20, it never existed as an actual real physical book. So, but I think this works fine right here. There is some confusion when it comes to how NPCs work, because it says in the rules that NPCs don't have attack rolls. They just do their attacks because they have to declare them first, and then players can react. And if players don't defend or move out of the way or do anything else, then the enemies just attack them with their abilities that they've declared. But the confusing thing is, if you actually click on the NPC sheets, first of all their names are Scientist NPC, which I don't think is correct. Shouldn't be correct. But as you can see here, they actually have attack rolls, which is bizarre. So I'm not sure. I got really confused on how NPCs work. And if you look at the compendium for NPCs, which you can which is cool enough, you can drag them to the map, and that will add the token because there are extra ones here. So for example, you want to add this epic plasma ghost to your game. You can add it, and the token appears right there. And then, as you saw, the character sheet just opened up, and then here's what the character sheet looks like. But if you click on this thing in the compendium, it looks completely different. It looks like this. So I don't know if this is supposed to be an NPC sheet or what the difference is, but this looks like a completely different looking thing versus this, which looks more like a player character sheet. So I'm not sure what's going on there, and I don't know why it has you rolling attacks when I don't think you're supposed to roll. So I was very confused on how all that works. And unfortunately, there's not, you know, while there are good rules for the game, well, the RPG, there's not a good tutorial for actually looking at the stuff in Roll20 and figuring out how some of these things are actually supposed to work. And I'm a little confused about why they even have attack rolls if NPCs don't actually attack, for example. Let's look at this adventure. The landing page is really cool. This is Burning Daylight, by the way. My only complaint here is I didn't know how to interact with it. I love landing pages in Roll20. That's something that's gotten really popular now, where people have like a communal thing that you can leave the players, you know, drag the little players banner here, and then every time they start the game, and every time you end the game, you'll put them on this page, and it's a good reminder about what they were doing, who the characters are. I love that there's a little spot for your ship. You got your ship name, your livability rating. The only reason I didn't really praise this enough is that there's no way to interact with these fields as far as I can tell. And again, it's cool that this page is here, but why isn't there more interactivity? I know Roll20's got it. You know, can we not have like a rollable token that we can change to denote certain symbols? And this should be a text field in here already in play. Like, I don't even understand what you're supposed to be doing in this window here. So it's a neat idea that just got not fully executed, I think. That's the landing page. So the adventure, the world is on fire. How about yours? The galaxy is actually on fire, or at least as far as this poor Alaxis galaxy is aware, by the burn, which is this giant encroaching kind of catastrophic state where the universe is coming to an end of this burning light that's consuming everything in its path. And so it's a story about like natural catastrophe, about refugees pouring in, about, you know, a bunch of ne'er-do-wells taking advantage of the situation. There's a pretty nice history here, but it does the smart thing about not creating too much like lore and just enough for you to be able to fill the spaces in. So I thought that part was pretty well written. This is a nice map in general. In terms of the actual battle maps, though, we're not getting a whole lot with this adventure because it's a very, 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 very short adventure. I was really hoping that if we're going to get a whole new rule set, we were going to get an adventure that was around Phandelver sized. So something that had, you know, advanced characters up, maybe completed one of their, in this game would be the equivalent of completing a story path, I think. And when you complete one, you start a new one, so you're always just doing one and advancing. You know, gets through a nice little arc of an adventure and does all that. This one is not that. Burning Daylight, instead, is more equivalent to the kind of introductory adventures you would find in source books, like, for D&D, it'd be Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, or the Eberron, Rising from the Last War, which are level 1 only, very short, typically only have 1 or 2 or 3 encounters, and then maybe kind of an ending little dungeon scenario, and that's exactly what this is. So, in fact, it has 4 parts, and one of the parts, part 1, you're on a cool like city world, and there's casinos and stuff going on, and there's an encounter, which is neat. Part 2 is literally just getting to the place you need to go, which is this dungeon where these people have been, or this space station, where these people have been kidnapping folks. That's all of part 2, and it could be a battle, or it could just be you convince the people to let you on. Part 3 is the actual big dungeon area. I guess I should go to these maps first. So part 1, this is what it looks like. And I like these maps. These are very nice looking maps. As you can see, dynamic lighting is in place. If you're a Roll20 subscriber, then that works out. I was hoping some of the vehicles might have dynamic lighting, but oh well. But good looking maps, I thought. And then part 3 takes place here in Inferna. And they're good sized maps too, actually. You can see I'm at 70% zoom right now, and these are what the maps look like, which is pretty nice. And again, dynamic lighting is there. You can see if you want to open any doors or windows or airlocks or whatever it is, you can move these orange ones separately from the blue. And that all's cool. And then part 4, you're just leaving. So it's just not much going on. Like, the whole thing is going to take, maybe 2 or 3 sessions at the most, and that's what you've got. So it's not necessarily a great story or anything. I mean, there's this bad cult who worships the burn, is kidnapping folks, and the whole end game for the main villain is just to like broadcast the players fighting these laser beasts on like the equivalent of like YouTube in this universe, and then have, obviously, with the assumption that the laser beasts destroy the players, and then they can have that be a viral recruiting video. It's really goofy and silly, which I think is part of what Bryte is supposed to be thematically. But it's not terribly like compelling or interesting either. I didn't think so. It's disappointment for sure in the included adventure. I was expecting a lot more, especially if you're going to make your own RPG system with your own unique world. Then show that off. Get into the nitty gritty of like, let's go to some 1 or 2 races, home worlds, or deal with these factions specifically and see what they're all about, or the unique governances of certain areas, or the creatures, which it very much uses a more abstract version of like epic animal, epic robot. There's not really specific creatures ever. You can just kind of substitute your own. But what's odd is Roll20 is specifically a virtual tabletop where you can have tokens of specific art. So don't abstract things. Make specific creatures and use that as your art token. I mean, don't like. In this case, this one art token is supposed to assume all kinds of formidable animals. Like, I would have let's get a lot more tokens in there, folks. Like, let's take advantage of the fact that we want to have different tokens. Don't cheap out on me here. I want all these multiple tokens for multiple different creatures, because if we're using Roll20, I'm more than likely going to be very, very interested in using maps and tokens. So that part's a little bit of a bummer. Now, I would almost say don't even get the adventure. Oh, and here's what the ship looks like. I can show you that real quick, too. This is actually pretty cool. This is what your ship looks like, at least the starting ship for this adventure. And if you get the rule book, which is included in the starter bundle, I believe it's the rule book, the ship components, which is here under the art gallery, you can actually just drag these onto the ship and have those be like upgrades that you can place like anywhere in these little modules. And so you're literally physically adding modules to your ship, which that is an example of a good way of Roll20 implementing, an RPG system. Is you've got a physical ship, it looks like an FTL, video game where your little tokens can be on here, and you can add your own little modules on here. And then when you have ship combat, you use the same map and you just move enemy tokens around. Oh, that's not good. The dynamic lighting on this is all kinds of screwed up. I just noticed that. I wonder if I did that maybe at some point. Maybe I moved it around. If I did, I didn't mean to, but you can tell this is supposed to be over the ship. But I would almost turn off dynamic lighting because, or maybe it's just the GM is supposed to say to the players, but you're supposed to move the enemy ships around, essentially, and then players can decide how best to deal with that. But, you can drag these on here, figure out how big they are one by one. You can rotate them around, whatever you want to do. But I just think that's kind of a cool option to be able to literally physically see the upgrades on your ship. So I thought that was pretty cool. To show off the other stuff, I'll need to make a new page. Oh, and then the that one that which one came with the other ships? It just includes the other ship maps on here. So there's 3 other ones you can use. The Wanderer is one of them, and the other 2 are Predator and Bolt, which are different ship layouts, which might take a second to load. There we go. Yep, that's what it looks like. All right, so the main thing you get if you buy the starter bundle is let's see, I got to go back to this. What I mentioned earlier in the review, which was the map art tile packs. So that looks like, let's say we want to make a laboratory dungeon map, for example. So this adds a whole bunch of modular tiles that you can use to create kind of a room-to-room map. So you would drag them onto here, and I believe the default size for all of these is typically 25 by 25, which is going to be the well, let's see, how big is this map? 25 by 25. Excellent. So you would drag it to be the entire size of this map. And I believe that is the map. That looks really poor resolution, though. Maybe it's not supposed to be 25. I thought it was. And then if we want to add another... Let's see, I'll need to make it twice as big. Maybe they're not that... I mean, you could scale it however you want, but... Oh, shit. What did I do? 17... 50, 50. Let's make this one 50. Oh, I see. Okay. So if we want to create another room, then you would drag another one of these on here. And you would have to... It'd be nice if those were actually sized correctly, but instead you gotta blow it up. And then all of the doors and things should align like that. And that's how you can start basically putting your own dungeon together. This might be blown up way too big, but you get the basic idea of what you're supposed to do here. And you've got a bunch of these. Like, there's 40, some in most of them, and then one of them has like twice as many. It's got like 80. I think it's the alien jungle world, because they're all kind of similar looking tiles. But you know, between all that, you can make your own map. So that part's good. While Burning Daylight itself doesn't come with very many in the way of maps, I feel like with these, you can actually craft most of the maps that you need, and you know, you can create multiple, either one big dungeon map or just a bunch of little small ones, and obviously you can rotate them around and put dynamic lighting and cut off different rooms and whatever you need to do to make your own adventure. So I think that actually does a pretty solid job, and that's a good example of Roll20 taking advantage of how a lot of folks build maps now, which is instead of having one big image file that you dump onto the board and then that's all you got, you actually have these different cut-up pieces, like a puzzle piece, that you can use to craft and make all kinds of different dungeons. So that part's really cool, pretty big. Thumbs up for that. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I'm trying to look back through my notes because there was a lot involved here. I mean, obviously, if you all have questions, you can let me know. I may put out that other video about diving further into how Roll20 works, or how, Bryte works, and how character creation and skills and everything. But hopefully I covered enough to where you get a feel of how this game works and what all comes in this actual bundle. I can give you my quick rundown for pros and cons for Burn Bryte, however. Pros, story paths. I like that idea a lot. They offer unique player-driven system of leveling up. I think as long as they're not abused by players who want to do them too often, and as long as everybody can tell decent stories there, and I think, you know, the GM can obviously prepare everybody. It's like, okay, what's their next story going to be, and how can I implement this? And to build off that, Burning Daylight, as another pro, includes suggestions, you can see here on every single part, on how to further all of the pre-generated character story paths, which is very helpful. And it basically wants you, between these 4 parts, between the entire this introductory adventure, make sure everybody completes the first step of their story path. And it offers suggestions like, hey, for the mentor story path, there's this NPC you could use, or for the create a masterpiece story path, there's all these different, you know, celestial phenomenon when they're out there in space they could use, and that kind of thing. So good examples of how to get that rolling for all the players. Pro, Nova points encourage players to occasionally use bad skills. I think that's a pretty clever way of having that, of implementing that system, of having skills that your players would almost never use. It probably leads to hilarity, or just leads to maybe tactical planning on your players' part. Like they would use, when they really want to succeed on something, they'd use their good skills. And when they've got something that's maybe a little bit easier, or they feel like, I just really want to earn this Nova point here, then that's when they can use their less good skills. And I think that's a good system. Pro, 5 pre-generated characters ready to begin the adventure right away. I always like to have pre-generated characters in these introductory adventures. Pro, dozens of modular map tiles to create your own maps. That was very, very good, and a good way to balance the fact that this is a very short adventure and doesn't have very many maps. Pro, the quick start rules are an effective way to quickly learn the basics, which are included here and are very easy to just click on that, click on combat, get the very basics of how things work, and then if you want the actual core rulebook, you can click that on the compendium. And Pro, I think the character monster is very well integrated into with Bryte. So elegant character creation and advancement. And even if you complete your story path, which I can show you that real quick. Let's use our Kithik friend. If you check that you've completed a story path, it actually opens up this character advancement thing, and you can choose your reward. Like, okay, getting this done allows you to increase the die size of one of these skills. So it kind of automatically enters like character level up mode, basically, which is cool to see. Cons, the system ones first, and then the more idea ones. But one of the cons is the token marker pack is actually really annoying to install. Like, you have to jump through a couple of hoops. You have to download it manually to your computer. I may be wrong on some of this stuff, but this is how I was able to understand it. I followed the instructions. Even if you buy it, you have to manually download the zip file to your computer, and then you have to create a custom token marker library set in here, and then you have to add it as a token marker set here, and then finally you can actually use that in here, which I guess I could show you what those actually look like. So you click on, I'm still at 70%. Click on one of your tokens, and then you click on the little symbols, and then you've got all these extra symbols. So players that usually use Roll20 recognize these. This one, you add a whole bunch of these on here, which they can either denote certain statuses, or it mentions one useful thing you can do is, because enemies have to target specific players, specific characters, you can put the symbols on the enemy and the player to denote who they're targeting. So that actually comes in handy. You totally don't need these to play the game, but they're there, they're extra. But it's annoying to have to install it like that. I don't know why buying them doesn't instantly add them. That's annoying. Con, there was a lot of confusion for me regarding how NPC character sheets work, given that they've got like attack rolls and everything built in, so I was very confused on that. I didn't find a good solution because there's not just any information about a breakdown of how these things work in Roll20. Con, Burning Daylight is extremely short. I was really hoping for something that was closer to Fandelver size. Instead, I got, I forgot the names of them, but those very short level 1 adventures that are found in the more of the setting source books rather than a full-on new RPG adventure. So disappointing there. And Con, kind of an overall complaint. I try to just summarize my overall biggest complaints about Bryte into one con, which is that skill rolls and failure consequences are left entirely up to the GM. And I thought that was just a little bit, I appreciate a rules light system, and I appreciate everybody trying to tell the story together. That's what an RPG should be. But man, it just seems like there's too much openness and too much freedom when it comes to the skills. The fact that player can use any skill to attack any enemy or any skill to do any task gets overwhelming, I think, from both a player and a GM standpoint. Now, I have not played this in the wild, so maybe I'm completely off base here, but that part actually kind of turned me off. I don't know why it couldn't have been like, all right, to do this task, you'll need to do one of these 3 skills, or even do a mental skill or a physical skill. Narrow it down at least a little bit to give your players, some kind of structured freedom, but instead this total openness is a little bit much for me, honestly. Alright, final verdict for Bryte. While the included introductory adventure is short and mostly forgettable, Bryte is a rules-light RPG with interesting systems, focusing on player freedom and storytelling. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.